question about the camp. There's nothing else that I had to offer, so if you're happy, I'll take questions. Yeah, no worries. Sorry, you had a question?
So, Nick, what's your tree canopy coverage target for these areas? We've got a lot of high density here. I can't see many green spaces for people. So how are you going to meet your target? Is it going to be 30% or above for tree canopy coverage? I was looking at your shops there, and that's quite a heat island. I don't see any space for large shade trees like you find in your traditional Canberra shopping centres.
Yeah, we don't have a target of 30%. Obviously, we are limited in what street trees that we put in because TCCS are very strict in terms of what they will take. We've invested quite heavily in the trees that have gone into the verges around there.
What are the size of your verges? Are they standard Canberra size or are they small?
TCCS, the EPSDD are quite strict on what our verge sizes are. Can't give you the exact dimension. I think it's 12 metres. I had one of our engineers here. I could tell you, but we believe that there is a responsibility. So the verges are an asset that ultimately go to the territory, and so there's a responsibility for trees to go into those areas. There's also a responsibility of landowners to do trees in their front yard before you get to the verge.
They can only plant trees if the blocks are big enough.
Yeah. Well, we believe that variation 369 was drafted. We put forward some comments about that in terms of we think there's work that can be done on the verges and in the front yards to help achieve the greatest tree canopy. Working in the backyards makes it much more difficult, and we also believe that the sorts of trees that we put into those verges and the front yards in particular will have a massive impact about canopy. So you can put a gum tree into a verge and you're going to get a totally different shade canopy to what you are if you put a deciduous tree into.
So the government's recommended native trees for verges in their tree report that came out of the ANU.
There are strong recommendations for some native trees.
Well, their main purpose is mainly native trees.
Is that what's going on?
So is that going to comply with the government's requirements? Your design?
We have to lodge it. Everything that we lodge is approved by government, and so yes, it has to comply. So our landscape architects obviously go through the detail of what's there, and then they design what is required.
The only reason I'm asking is that in the US, these sorts of designs are becoming a big issue amongst architects and town planners. They see the risk of heat island effect.
Yep.
And in Western Sydney now, there are academics coming out saying that the designs in a lot of these new areas of Western Sydney mean that they're all being unbelievable because the houses are too close together. There's not enough room space. There's not enough canopy coverage. So they're saying that the ambient temperature in those places, once you get heat waves, is over 50 degrees and people can't use their air conditioners. So are you concerned about that and taking that into account into your designs?
We're very conscious of what the street trees and the verges do look like. We, in my opinion, go above and beyond in what is created and provided in those verges. And these verges need years for trees to develop. So if you go up to the Ridgeline Park 2 years ago when we completed it, there were no trees up there at all. They are developing, but they need time to develop. The same with the street trees through the balance of we have landscapers going through and maintaining those trees, pruning the stems so they actually grow up and actually do give you a canopy. You'll notice the maintenance of the trees that we've done down in the shops. And if you compare that to maintenance of trees elsewhere in the territory, that's all been done by us, and not that it's our requirement because we've actually handed these assets over. It's just that we believe that that's the right thing to do. But I hear what you're saying, but I'm not an expert in trees or green spaces, and I've researched, so I've come across examples. We're in another subdivision up in Queensland with Stockland, we're a joint venture partner in there. actually about the buildings themselves and what they do with the buildings and the reflective nature of the roofs that they put on there. So all of the roofs through there are white rather than ours are all black, which absorb the heat, create islands. The biggest thing is the bitumen that runs down the middle of the wheel drive. Yeah. So.
So I understand that the government's stipulating size to the district and so on. And so you're looking at a certain number of cubic metres that has to accommodate utilities and then whatever's left for tree roots. And I'm wondering in this area, how big a tree can go in there? What sort of height have they stipulated to possibly accommodate?
We don't have height stipulated to us, but generally the trees that we're putting into our verge is about 2 metres.
2 metres?
2 metres, yeah.
Tall?
Yeah.
So that's a shrub?
That's the full.
No, that's a tree.
Oh, you think that's the height that goes in?
Correct.
And what about the final height? Like what's final height of those trees?
They'll be 4 to 6 metres.
So
Once-
once they're fully grown, they'll be 4 to 6 metres.
Correct.
Yeah, that won't provide enough
So
shade.
that's a shrub.
Yeah.
Not a tree.
So in a standard
6
suburb,
metres. It's well shown.
yeah, in a standard Canberra suburb, in the old Garden City suburbs,
Yep.
you have trees which are 12 to 20 metres, which provide enough shade and shelter for individuals.
Yeah.
Shade over the roads, which as you know, Richmond is extremely hot.
Yep.
And shade over footpaths, and shade over footpaths, and that sort of stuff. So I
So-
think I think
so
the
in-
building will be on there.
Well, but okay, there are certain elements to this. One is actually the affordability. So if you went into an old Canberra suburb and you build a road where the verges are twice as big and the blocks are 800 or 1,000 square metres big, then the simple maths of actually putting that there put the blocks beyond the affordability of what people are going to be able to
So is
pay.
that because of the land price that the ACT government is actually asking you to pay?
Oh, but
Is that the major input?
No, I'm not a planner. My background is in valuation and I'm a project manager. In terms of planning, I think the driver is the densification that people are looking for, the footprint that people actually live on is becoming smaller. And so with that comes higher density, roads become narrower, verges become narrower.
Although number one thing that people do before when they actually go to buy a home is something in the backyard. If you look at all the real estate surveys, that's the number one thing that people are looking for. So I think people are being given a choice here, and I think that the developers are being forced to pay too much for land.
My personal belief is I think affordability drives most people in terms of their property acquisition. I mean, that's where it's at. And one of the serious costs in providing that is the planning approval process. So it's and this is an Australia-wide thing. It's not just Canberra. It's Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane,
Yeah.
Perth.
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
planning approval process. So you would have, if you paid $500,000 for a block of land, there would be $250,000 that would be tied up in the actual planning approval processes to get to that point where you're building a block.
So that's government charges.
It's arranged. Government charges just the time that it takes to get it through so it's, the northern part of this estate we've been working on now since 2017. We still don't have an approval to go, and that was a $136 million acquisition that is sitting there on all the holding costs plus all the consultants, and then every time you launch your EDP it goes through 23 circulations, 23 agencies and
So
government.
is that because that you're required to actually clean the roads or the infrastructure and actually develop that?
Correct. modelled on selling between 15 and 20 blocks a month. So that's our forecast. So I would say 5 years until we're finished doing the subdivision and our infrastructure works, and then there'll be another 2 or 3 years after that while buildings get built on those lands that we service. That's another question.
When is the bridge going to be started?
I'm not the one to answer that. I can tell you what I understand to be the case is the DA for the bridge got approved about a month ago. I believe that they're going out to tender for the bridge over the course of the next 6 months, and then it'll still be a 2 to 3 year program to build the bridge. So it's going to be some time until there are cars going straight along the John Gordon Drive to the north. So there's going to be that little race down the bottom to get across to Whitlam, heading to the north, and obviously ongoing issues with the flood damage that is caused to Copham's Crossing, which has a pretty dramatic impact on us as well. So, but that's the best that I know. But I'm going on second-hand information here. So that's right. Another question.
Thanks, Val mentioned my question, which is pretty much another one, which is when it's over there, why would you go home by addressing buses, and in particular then the prospect, you're going to give us to go home if somebody can't drive, and this is something possible, you're smashed the car, you go to schools there, it can be 2 hours to just 5 kilometres. No comment. So I'm just wondering if you've got any insights on that.
Unfortunately, I don't have any insights. That's really a question. Again, it's a question for government. I know that there is. I think it's Minister Steele's problem, isn't it? But anyway, look, I'm a resident out there as well. I use the buses, which I've actually found going to Civic actually to be quite good. But I understand completely. I can't get to the airport, which is where I want to go to, without going to Civic and then heading across, and so I don't do it. But I've been throwing my bike on the front of the bus and going wherever I need to go to. But I can't answer your question, sorry, so on that one. The city services is not our thing. We're about building the infrastructure and doing that in the most timely fashion that we can.
I'll add a little comment to that, which is I feel quite strongly we're setting up a carbon society by not having this infrastructure there on day one. That's a comment. Talk to Chris Bill, tell him that. Why don't we
Yeah, no, I understand. I get caught in that car park coming out of John Gordon Drive as well. It's a challenge, and obviously encouraging people onto public transport, whatever nature it is that's there, is one way to deal with it. And then obviously then having the roads and infrastructure to for people to move. So,
think about it?
Thanks, Nick, for that. I think if you want to continue the conversation over trees and spacing, I'll leave that to you, but thanks for coming along and giving us an overview. It's always wonderful to catch up. Can you forward that to us?
yeah, I'll send you the.
Yeah, and we'll put it up. We need to catch up for coffee at Denver and Prospect again.
Good on you, thanks, Tom.
Marissa Patterson, would you like to come? Can I suggest you come up this side? It's probably the safest of the two. It's not safe, but it's the safest of the two. Yeah. Marissa's one of our MLAs, and it's wonderful always to see her here. Thank you for coming. I know you've had a busy day at the Assembly. Yeah. Okay, over to you.
Thank you very much for having me here tonight. So it has been a busy week. I'm still getting used to Assembly sitting periods. So I thought I'd just quickly give a brief overview of some of the things that were passed in the Assembly this week while it's at the forefront of my mind. That's right. So I thought the single-use plastics ban laws were passed in the Assembly. So from mid-year, plastic cutlery, polystyrene, takeaway sort of packaging, and stirrers will be banned. And then over the next couple of years, increasingly more and more of the plastics single-use plastics will be banned as the law comes into place. There was a few tripartisan motions passed in the Assembly, which is quite interesting. So one of them was a motion to restore territory rights. So basically so that we can pass laws on voluntary assisted dying in the ACT. So in 1997, the federal government overruled the Northern Territory's laws to allow voluntary assisted dying, and basically said that the two territories weren't allowed to legislate on that, which effectively means that citizens of the ACT and the Northern Territory have less rights than the states. So we had tripartisan support in the Assembly to call on the federal government to restore territory rights so that we can debate these laws and make these laws. A big feature of this week's Assembly sitting was sexual assault law reform. So that's been quite an emotionally charged motions and debates and discussions in the Assembly, stemming from what's been going on in Parliament House. So basically the Minister for Women, Yvette Berry, is leading a sexual assault reform working group that will start involving all the sort of significant stakeholders in the ACT, basically because it's well and truly recognised that there's reform needed across Australia and in the ACT. Locally, Duffy shops. I have been talking to residents about Duffy shops and the upgrades that will happen there over the last few weeks, and the government has just sort of launched their Your Say panel as well on that. So you can either email me or you can go onto that website, which I can send through to Tom, and have your say on what you would like to see happen at the Duffy shops. I've had lots and lots of good feedback so far, which is great, and so really encourage any ideas, any and all. I saw in the agenda that you're going to discuss the man that's been going around knocking on people's doors, so I thought I'd just briefly speak to that, because that has been quite a significant problem over the last couple of months now, and there's quite a lot of concerned residents. So I think yes, it's a social welfare issue. This man needs help, and so we're trying to get services to him. There's also obviously an issue with the community, knocking on people's doors at 5 and 6 in the morning and asking for money, particularly older people in the community that perhaps aren't aware that he's doing this, and can give you quite a fright. So, and also if he's telling a story that then people are handing him over money, so it's a bit of a problem. There's been a lot of talk and awareness about it on the Western Creek Neighbourhood Watch page, and I have spoken to police about it. I've written to the minister about it, and the message is, if you are concerned, call police or put a report through Crime Stoppers. The shops here are aware of it, and I think we just have to work as a community to get through this at the moment. Really strict. So I do have to leave, but I am very interested to hear your feedback from your survey.
It'll be online in the discussion we have tonight.
Yep.
I'll have Lisa in the presentation.
Great, that'd be fantastic. So started any formal consultation on that yet, but that will come later on in the year. So I think that's a bit of a summary of where things are at and the last couple of days of the assembly. So thank you.
Okay, I'll stop here. Thanks, Marissa, for that. Bill, you've got a question?
Yeah, Marissa, sorry.
That's right.
I noticed the Federal Labor Party put out a solar energy policy. Put aside the first part, the vehicles. The second part had localised batteries. Now, I'm wondering, because when I looked at the Duffy plans, I was already thinking that way, and I saw this and thought, they're finally beating up Bo out of the party. I don't like the other guy, Joel. I was wondering why stuff like that, thinking like that, wasn't incorporated into Duffy plans. It's surely it would have been hard to put the solar panels over the parking, take the water runoff, feed the plants, feed the native gardens that go in, and capture the electricity, power the lights, and even perhaps feed the overflow into the grid. Just my thought. And we'll be feeding that, like, at least the person feeding on,
Yep.
the Swain Council. We'll feed that into your inquiry as well.
Fantastic. That sounds excellent. I'm very happy to take that, report that feedback, and would appreciate that coming through as well. Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa, for that. We had a bit more publicity as well on it in relation to the door knocker, and
Yeah.
Bill was on radio yesterday and I was on radio this morning. And so it's a good warning to be able to get out into the community to make them all aware of it. So
Yeah, I strongly encourage people to talk to your neighbours and, let people know.
So has somebody actually spoken to him? Does he have social case workers or?
I don't know. So that will be a matter for the services to determine, but I've tried to speak to him.
I've known the gentleman for about 10 plus years. I live about 15 houses down from this guy. But he's living in his own residence, he's inherited it. So he's not short of cash. He knows what he's doing. He's very clever at it. I've seen him walk up to my house, clear as day, next thing turns on the waterworks like he's just had, lost the memory.
So is it fools?
Yeah, he is. He knows exactly what he's doing and he's doing it well. And he's got to be stopped because the elderly people around the area don't have a lot of social media facilities. I have canvassed the area and a lot of them on Facebook.
So we don't have laws in the ACT to stop people soliciting money with
This is
fraudulent means.
Well, you need to call the police. So if
The police go there, when you live up the road, when you see his house, the police are there every week. And last time the police were there was 5 cops there because of whatever was going on. Is that all known to the police? The police know him by his first name. You can ring up and say, Jason's doing it again, cops go, Damon's doing it with the addresses, I know where I'm going.
Yeah, so he's done jail time.
I believe he's been in and out. He hasn't done jail time for this.
But I think
There's no law against apparently. He's not being, he's obtaining finances from people by accident.
look,
He
it's,
also lost people in the car park.
yeah.
Yeah.
Look, my concern is that he's been around the car park. About 3 years ago was the first time he asked me for money down there. What concerns me is that his behaviour has changed. So that, to me, this door knocking business, this is new, and so I think that's concerning. And I think it's a mental health issue, and we need to. Everyone is trying to work on this, so we need the community to. Yeah, it's mental health.
But I don't think you can box it in as mental health when you've got to have some consideration for victims of this.
Yeah,
And I think that the victims need to be put first, and because it seems it's perpetrator behaviour, and there's got to be something that can be done because there's only so many times that we can call the police, and I'd love to see the stats on it. Right, that'd be something before you kind of have to go, well, yeah, this
not a well person, and so we have to manage this sensitively, I think.
Yeah, he's as sharp as he knows exactly what he's doing. He's
Well, with
he's
the
so
level of
sharp.
community awareness that exists at the moment about him, and he continues to do it, tells me that something's not right. So it's not a normal response.
Okay, look, I'm gonna cut this off here.
Sorry, Tom, I just want to ask, just Tom said the mental health issue.
John,
Are there not services that we provide?
John.
There's nowhere to put him, so to speak.
Yes.
There is nowhere to put him. Mental health facilities in Canberra are hemorrhaging. There's nowhere to put an 18-year-old kid that's having a psychotic break at the moment, let alone a middle-aged man who's got, housing and so on. There's nowhere. It's a huge issue. Yeah.
Thanks, Marissa. Thanks, Marissa, for that. What's going on?
Acoustics are pretty good. Yeah, we can, yeah.
No, we're recording. Was that off, is it? Yep. Okay. Technical pitch. John Nicholas is here from, sorry about that, from Burden Developments, and this is in relation to a demonstration housing project in Rubbo Crescent in Western. We just, what do I do? Yes. This goes back a ways, and in 2017 the government decided that they would go ahead with this demonstration housing project. They called for expressions of interest in April 2018. There were 27 proposals came in, 17 were proceeded with. Then there was a request for proposals which closed in January 2019. They've all been before the National Capital Design Review Panel. And we're now at a stage where some of these projects are rolling out. One of these is in Rubbo Crescent, and John's going to tell us about it. But when we get to questions, I'd ask you to be respectful, please.
Thanks, John. Great. Thanks very much, John.
You just take this where you want to take.
No worries. Look, first of all, thank you for having us here tonight. So my name is John Nicholas. I'm here from Verdant Developments. I'm here along with my team. So my wife Shari, who's over there. Also Verdant Developments, Chloe, who's helping with our community. Bianca, who's helping with our community consultation, and Chloe, who's our architect. And so there is a government involvement in this project as well, and so we have Bruce as well from the Demonstration Housing Project team at the back of the hall. But so look, we're here to do the pre-DA consultation, as Bianca's going to talk about, but I just wanted to give you a brief rundown, and there'll be time for questions about why this project has come into being, what its genesis is, what exactly makes it special and why it's different, which Chloe can talk to, and then hopefully to have an opportunity to try and persuade you to in fact support this development as a benchmark exemplar of urban densification in RZ1 zones that could potentially set the template for future legislative frameworks. So let me take you through it. Really the reason why this project exists is because my wife and I were looking for somewhere to buy and we couldn't find what we wanted. It was either kind of mega houses on mega blocks or mega houses on tiny blocks. We wanted the missing middle. There really isn't much out there. It's a bit of a captive market. And so what we wanted in particular was a courtyard style house with lots of green space, but particularly, and this was an emphasis that really came from my wife Shari, she wanted to make sure that it was fully disability accessible, or as accessible as possible. She's had some family members, as many of us have, who have been either injured or disabled and just weren't able to access either their own residences after an injury or accident, or those of their relatives, and it really frustrated and prevented them from living a full social life. So we've come up with a design that's largely fully disability accessible. It's got lifts inside it, but most uniquely, it's got a third title within it. And that's what makes this a demonstration house. So within the footprint of what is currently allowable for dual occupancy on the same block, we've managed to fit in an extremely livable, fully disability accessible third title that lends the capacity for people who buy one of the units to have a third micro unit, as it were, a studio apartment which is fully disability accessible, has access to green space, and can allow for essentially aging in place and future intergenerational swaps of equity, and the kind of flexibility that we really need as we move into a denser urban environment, and as housing stock becomes more limited. So look, that's where it came from. We're here, of course, at the pre-DA consultation phase. I'll hand over now to Bianca to talk about that, and then to Chloe to talk you through the project, and we've got some pictures to make it all a little bit more real. Thank you.
Thanks, John. So as you'll see, my business card's attached to the top of that. Now, the reason that I have been brought on in support of this project is I'm a Western Creek resident as well. I live in Fisher, I know all about the issues we're just talking about. And I actually bought the property that my grandparents built in 1970 and have watched developments happen all around me. So from a perspective of also having a professional relationship with John and Shari, it's also something I'm really passionate about in the way of a project, which you'll learn so much about tonight. The community consultation phase I've been engaged in to act as a little bit of an intermediary between yourselves and the team to be able to help gauge questions, give you assurances, vet any issues back to people. The community consultation effectively starts tonight. So we have already spoken with some of the people that live nearby. We've had some of the information that's in our hands here has been dropped and delivered to 35 neighbours that surround the property. They're fully aware of what our intentions are. They've actually received even a bigger, comprehensive outline of the properties there. That happened in January. We engaged that start of the consultation, I suppose, where the neighbours were included. During that time, I had a couple of people reach out to me. They expressed a few concerns, mostly around what the project was about. Obviously, there's a connection with government, but that's not about the whole project. The whole project is a very big social project. And so we've had a couple of people come back, but in overall, everyone is quite supportive now that they've learned more about the project. We've then spoken with Tom, we've also met with the council, and this is obviously the next part. So what I encourage you to do is, while Chloe speaks and while John gives you more information, please make any notes that you have. Please, if there's any issues, raise them. You've got my details there. You can jump on the Verdant website and send an email directly to the Verdant project, and that's where we would be able to collate that information and forward it on to where is necessary and help get the best outcome for everybody. Excellent. Chloe?
So I guess I'll just take you through a few of the design elements behind Verdant. As John mentioned, it's primarily a two-dwelling development that provides a level of care to the residents. As John mentioned, there's a single bedroom, fully accessible unit that's actually incorporated into overly different to a singular double-storey house that actually exists in Weston. It is sympathetic to the suburb around by taking gable forms that are dotted around Weston, but bringing it onto the site in a contemporary sense. So using materials that are sympathetic to the suburb, both using heavyweight but also lightweight that's textural, and neutral in colour palette as to not stand out and to really just nestle itself into the suburb. John mentioned before, the thing about Verdant that really is quite special is that idea of concept of green space. All the residents have access to private green space, whether it be courtyards, whether it be their rear yard, or if from inside, looking out onto the proposed green roof that we had. It was quite important for the design to, I guess, sort of bring in that vegetation in a way that most developments don't. And really emphasise that connection between the inhabitants and nature. So by having a green roof that allows for deep planting and a substantial garden that doesn't just benefit the residents of Verdant, but also the outlook from the neighbouring residences as well. That idea as well, I guess, by trying to minimise the hard space that we have on site, whether it be the roof surfaces or the paving at the ground level, and maximising the green space and vegetation, really, I guess, sort of counteracts that idea of big developments and heat islands and how, you know, they're not great, to put it quite bluntly. If you look at, I guess, a comparison between the previous development on the left to the proposed development, in terms of the existing roof surface, but also the hard space on the ground level, we're bringing that back by over 100 metres squared in terms of that hard paving, and bringing that back into the green roof with vegetation. If you look at the left-hand side here is the existing or previously, the house that was previously there in terms of the green space they have, we're then also bringing that back into the site by over 100 metres squared again, so that I guess the vegetation has been elevated to a roof plane that then allows for that green space to still exist. I guess it's quite special in that way. I think that, as I said before, it's not your typical development. It really tries to connect the inhabitants with the suburb and with the nature around it, and trying to do that in a way where it treads quite lightly and doesn't impose on Weston as a community, but hopefully tries to, I guess, give it a beneficial element in that way as well. I guess that's kind of general gist of design, and sort of running through some artistic renders at this stage in terms of the design. The building's not pink, but from the streetscape, from both sides, with of course the houses on existing sides, on either side, sorry, but also the idea of, you know, kind of hiding the cars below underneath the carport so that they're not dominant on the streetscape as well. I think that's kind of the gist. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Chloe. Cheers. So look, hopefully that gives you a good idea of the spatial layout and the special features of this development. There is, of course, a very beautiful model here, and I encourage you to go and have a look at that as well. Really, I think it's fair to say it is an architectural ornament, and would be if it was able to be developed. And again, so emphasising on some of the key points here, really we're here to seek your support. Obviously, it's controversial, urban densification on our Z1 blocks. This particular block is able already to have 2 dwellings because it's an old Mr. Fluffy block. But what's being permitted through this demonstration housing project process is a variation potentially to the territory plan that would enable a 3rd unit to be put on there. It's actually not clear, in fact it's probably quite quixotic that my wife and I have been pursuing this 3rd unit for so long now, and it's really not clear whether that's going to give us in fact any greater financial yield than just selling 2 reasonably decent sized dwellings, especially with the way the property market's going. But we've stuck with this idea of having a separately entitled 3rd unit, which again is within the footprint of 2 dwellings, because it does allow for greater flexibility in the future. You know, if you have parents who bought a home with their kids, they're able to buy one of the smaller unit, move in there, cash out their equity, but still keep some of their equity. And the thing that we really wanted to do here is to have a development that anyone could live in, even if you're disabled, even if you're injured, but have beauty around you. You know, it shouldn't be a captive market where you're forced to live somewhere where your wall is right up against the fence and there's no vegetation and there's no aspect and there's no view. That's just not good enough. So what we want this to be, I mean, we've had some feedback about, look, this is going to set a precedent, and then there's going to be the capacity to have three dwellings on RZ1 sites all across the city. That's not the case. There will only be a third dwelling on this particular site if there's a variation to the territory plan, if this project is supported and ultimately passed by the Legislative Assembly. But it's fair to say that this is supposed to be setting a precedent, and we think it sets the right one. So if this development is supported and we're able to bring this into reality and into fruition, then it can set the standard. So in our view, the kind of policy that we suggest, and ultimately this is a matter for the council, but the kind of policy that we think should be supported is not one that completely is opposed to change. I mean, change is going to come, change is a part of existence obviously, but it has to be the right kind of change. So if there's going to be a third unit on a particular block, on an RZ1 block, we would say, for example, it would have to be of a certain size, say 800 square metres, this block's 900 square metres, and it has to tick some of the key principles that we want. So it would have to have full disability accessibility, it would have to have access to green space, energy efficiency, and also design excellence. So another thing that I would recommend, and we imagine, just as we've had to do, is to make sure that any development that had 3 units would have to go through the design review panel to make sure that you had a whole team of national architects looking at the project and to quality assure it. So look, if you have any comments, please feel free to ask them and also email them through to Bianca. And if it's opposition, that's fine, but if it's support, I also encourage you to express your support, please, as well. Yes, sir.
On the model with the road.
It's at the top of the slide.
Yeah, the top of the hill.
And so the back of the house actually will cross up against properties.
It does, but it's quite, I'll let you talk to
Yeah,
that.
the nature of the site and the way that it steps down, the development steps down as well. It also steps down as well, although I guess the higher element is sitting at the front. The reason for not having, say, a higher element and a double story all the way through to the back is so that we can maintain that element of privacy for the neighbours towards the back.
So how close is that to the fence line of the neighbours? The back balconies?
For the rear,
This tree's in the opposite yard. And you have to have a check, but it's probably around there. These rooms as well are not bedrooms or kitchens or living spaces. They're multi-purpose spaces, so they can be used for all sorts of different things. So they could be someone's office, they could be someone's gym. It's not necessarily someone's bedroom peering straight into the
What is the height from the ground?
The height.
Yeah, so if someone wanted to plan something to give themselves privacy,
Yeah.
how tall would that
the planting on the green roof or something.
Or just
No,
the planting of the neighbour.
the neighbour?
is the back portion.
The back portion. So that's 2 stories. So it's your typical 2 stories. So if
The
you're
height of it?
What's
What's the height of it?
2 stories. So you're looking at 5 metres, about 5 metres from ground level to the top there. And to answer your question before, sorry, about how far back it is from the boundary, you're looking at about 7 to 8 metres. So there's driveway access through the back and that part. So that's a decent length.
So the neighbour's house would have to be quite away from the fence.
Yeah. Yeah, we're welcome to go and have a look at the site. That's a really great thing to do now.
We live near it.
Yeah, perfect. And so you'll see that I believe that there's a fair amount of vegetation that's part of that block already. Whatever people do, obviously you can't control that. But because your primary living spaces are away from where that is,
But it still looks over someone's property.
It does, to a degree, absolutely.
Yeah.
The side at the back, the existing house sits around at this point here. So you might see the small outline of the neighbouring residences. And that back one is just it's a bit further back.
But because of the incline of the block, you really are looking out at the mountains and treetops, essentially, when you're standing on the block.
Okay, so you might look over their roof.
Yeah.
Thanks for your presentation. I've got no comments on your design and the spatial sort of aspects. I'm more interested in the 3-unit title thing. You seem to be spruiking, that's probably a wrong word, I shouldn't say that, don't make a judgment. You seem to be saying that the little unit is going to be used by one of the families on the block for a relative or a relative or someone who needs some assistance in living at home. If that's the point, I don't understand why you're having 3 titles. I'd be interested to know how you propose to sell it. Are you selling 3 separate titles, which could mean 3 people who live there independently forever, which is virtually putting 3 residences on a block. Alternatively, if you have 2 separate units if one family has 2 separate units under the ownership of one of those parties, I think people should be aware of the bogey of land tax, which I have been very publicly opposed to. If a person owns 2 properties, one other than their permanent residence, that means the person in the small unit would be subject to land tax under a rental arrangement, which doesn't seem to me to be a very efficient way of caring in place for a loved relative. So I'm not quite sure what you're trying to do, whether you're trying to put 3 houses on one block or 2 plus 1 on one block.
I'm fine with that. From a how do we separate them and how do we sell them? That's definitely something that's very valid, and that's kind of where I personally have a family member who built a granny flat at the back of her daughter's house. She put all of her assets into building that granny flat. Now her husband has Alzheimer's, so they have to go into care effectively. She has no asset because she's effectively added equity to her daughter's property, and now they have nothing to go off and sell. So let's say hypothetically a family buys this with the idea of having their parents living down in the apartment. Something happens and those parents need to leave, they own that asset. So if they are needing to obtain funds, then that asset can be sold independent to the other ones if we go down that path. This has been done. There's another property in Fisher on Namatjira Drive that actually has an apartment as part of that. It's not always the easiest thing to sell, if I'm really honest with you, because you are looking at an apartment space that's connected to other properties. However, I could confidently say that there will be people that have been living in Fisher, in Western, for so long that they would like the opportunity to live in a street that they've always lived in, downsize without going into high density capacity locations, and be in a space that's beautiful, that's architectural, that is energy efficient, so that apartment could still be sold onwards. The people who own the rest of the house could buy it. There's lots of different variables. People might want to buy it and rent it, then they have the land tax, but that's on them. It is a variable. It could be that a family would buy it so they have a live-in carer, or they have an au pair, or it's very varied what people do with it. But that's the whole point. At the moment, we don't have a bridge between high density and medium. Yeah.
I was just wondering about if they sell the extra unit, parking that unit, because you've got the 2 carports at the back. I imagine there's no space for a car park at the back as well. Would there be space on the street? Would they be expected to park on there? Is that a convenient parking space?
So each unit, the carports at the back house two cars. There wouldn't be space necessarily to park out the back on the driveway, because that's a thoroughfare zone for the cars. So if you have visitors, it would be on-street parking.
I was, if you're going
Likewise for the apartment.
Yeah, because if they're going to live there, they're a relative, doesn't mean they want to give up their car. Because especially in Canberra, you give up your car, you give up your liberty.
Yeah.
Bus service is not great.
We had discussed. That's right. We had discussed that there would be the capacity to incorporate a space in landscaping that could be, available at the front for that front property. That's one of the things that we will also be working with when it comes to actually
talking about, your roof or the green roof, but in terms of the area of building that is touching the ground, that's only actually sitting at 35% of the site.
But then you've got driveway on top of that, which I
Yeah.
presume which is not touching the site.
Yeah. So,
How many square meters would that be?
so in terms of, I did write this down before. Yeah. So in terms of hard space, you're looking at actual building on the ground being 35%. So the site and the green space is 516. Then with the driveway, you're probably looking at, I think, about 100 metres squared max of hard paving, and the rest of that is designated to planting zones, whether it's lawn, whether it's no shrubbery, in courtyard walls and fences.
Sorry, what percentage of that would that be?
We can find that out.
Yeah, we can find it out.
We'll
We're
calculate
probably
it
looking at
exactly.
about 9%. So if it's a 900.
So 9% pavable site. Is that what you mean?
No, the driveway.
No, the driveway.
Oh,
Sorry.
the driveway, 35%.
Yeah,
Houses,
yeah, 35. So I guess if you add those two together, the remainder. Yeah.
And is that also, I'm just saying, because on the plan here, that's not to scale.
No, that's all to scale.
That's all to scale.
That's all to scale. Yeah.
Okay.
That's the green.
So that's the green roof.
Oh,
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
top,
that's the
that's
top.
okay.
So that's the first floor. So you're looking
Okay.
down at the green roof there.
So
Yeah.
you've addressed all the issues with green rooms.
Yeah. We've done a few before.
Yeah.
So on this basis then, there's no real space for a tree, would you say?
Oh no, it's on the green roof. So
Oh, not on the green, well, not on the green roof, I mean, it's in around the building.
around the building, yeah. There's if you're looking at the site plan here, while there is driveway that goes and curves around to the back of the site, in terms of especially for unit 1, which is the one at the top. Sorry, there's an ample amount of private open space and for trees and for planting. At the moment, there's not a lot existing on site. I think the only existing tree is potentially that one in the verge.
I don't even think that's there.
It's possibly gone now. But there is enough space where you'd be able to plant trees, whether it's, whether it becomes a 15 metre or 12 metre tree, likely not, but it's still a
So
substantial
how
amount.
tall would you anticipate that?
Oh, it's-
The reason I ask is because in the previous presentation,
Yeah.
Denver Prospect, I'm aware that the developer didn't change the legislation to determine what the height of a tree is.
Yeah.
But the government changed the legislation to determine that a tree is now 6 metres tall instead of a minimum of 12, which is what a normal tree. And this is really significant because 6 metres is a shrub height, in which case it's not going to cast sufficient shade to stop services from heating up and acting as heat vents.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm
Not being an arborist myself, I guess I'd predict just based on the amount of ground and ground space around that, where the tree can plant, you might be looking at an 8 to 10. But I'm not really an expert, I guess, in landscape.
sure. But which way do the utilities come into the utilities come in of the nature strip into the building? Do they come down under the actual footprint of the house or
Utilities,
Garbage.
as in water and gas?
Yeah, the service connection.
oh, the service connections.
I think the easement's running along.
Yeah, the
back.
easement runs along the back, so there's direct access for them straight through the driveway, which is also another reason why we propose to have the cars out the back.
So you
because
can't plant trees down
not along the
Only along the easement.
which is just
Very
that,
back.
that's
Yeah,
far
section.
back.
But they're really good questions, and in fact, it's something that the design review panel raised when it was submitted to them. And I think that's something that we're still responding to when it is submitted for DA. But yeah, to make sure that we're maximising deep-rooted planting, which is of course something that's close to our hearts as well. Certainly what we want to do. Yeah.
How deep would the roof depth go along the green roof?
On the green roof, depends, it's yet to be detailed further. It comes down to the structural engineering. Ones we've done for small developments in the past, you can get up to 500 to 600 millimetres of soil, so enough for shrubbery. Not enough for giant 10-metre trees. It's pretty impressive. We're doing one at the moment that they're going to try with native grasses on a 500 millimetre, sorry.
sorry, just a quick question for the people that we've got online who are at home. I've got a specific question very quickly. It's from Claire. Hi Claire. How many car parks are on the block? 4. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to suggest something that wasn't going to be my original, but since it was raised, is that raised big? Because you're actually initially saying that people have to park on the road, or is that just visitors?
Just visitors, so all the residents.
Because if that's the front of.
So this is the front of the property, and you drive along up here, and the block cascades in that direction away from the road. So this is your road, and so you drive in.
The raised bit is the front.
Is
So
the
that
front.
would be the carpool.
Yes, this carpool's down the
That's
bottom.
what I was going to say, but I don't know. But
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, my question actually was, I've gone through what you've handed me, but there's no map here telling us exactly where that block is.
Yeah. So
Don't
the-
actually have a block.
Yeah, so it's on 24 Robbo Present. It's on the website. So at the moment, the website is very much in a preliminary state. It's just there while we gather this information and we find out what's really crucial to display on that platform. What we'll be doing over the next week is we will be updating information about green space, confirming percentages so that information's on there. We'll have a really comprehensive FAQ page so that you can find out those kinds of things. It doesn't have a map on there. If you have to jump on the website now, the map is there. There's a little video that kind of shows you an aerial shot of what's around it, so that can help give a perspective. But that's another thing that's why your feedback and your questions emailed through is really important, because then we can collate that so that the rest of the community gets that information clearly on the website as
So
well.
where is it? Is that in Fisher?
It's in Western, Robbo Present in Western.
In where?
Robbo Present in Western.
Oh, no, I don't know. It's a land here. Street names. So it's in Western, it's already an existing block.
Yes, it's
already
a fluffy block.
outside.
Yeah.
They're going to knock it down.
It's already gone.
That's gone.
It's a vacant block. Yeah.
And they're happy with that. So they've sold it to you.
Well, the government sold it to us, yes, as part of the Mr. Fluffy buyback scheme.
Was it a government?
Yeah.
that-
Well, it wasn't a government house, but thank you. So it was a privately owned house, but it was a Mr. Fluffy block, and so then it was demolished, remediated, and then sold back at auction to the public, and that's when we bought it. Yeah.
Just a quick question, going back to cars. If there are 3 independent couples, that would be theoretically possibly 6 cars.
Yeah, look, on cars, there are 4 car parks there. Currently under the territory plan, I think we would, strictly speaking, need 5, so that's another, and Bruce, correct me if I'm wrong there, but that's another change that we're looking at. But I think over time, it's likely that usage of cars is going to decrease. Certainly in the meantime, I totally accept it's impossible to live in Canberra without a car, virtually, unless you live on the light rail and work in the city. But we don't think that that's a major concern, and one of the things that we've done with this particular project is to make sure that the car parks are not garages and they're not fixed as that use for all time, but instead they're carports which can be converted into open usable space. In fact, they are predominantly open as they are already. And I mean, look, you can't control how many cars a family has anyway. They may have 4, they may have 5 potentially. I mean, there are blocks around town that are obviously like that. But if we were to privilege cars over, I mean, I guess we're balancing all kinds of different objects and purposes and goals in this project, as with any planning. And if we were to prioritise, I guess, engineering concerns and transportation over other things, it would mean, for example, we'd have significantly less green space and much more hardtack and heat island effects, etc. So that's why we made the decision that for the 3rd unit, they might either be living in a close relationship with the people who are in the larger dwelling that it's incorporated into, and they'll be able to use one of the carports, or alternatively they might be able to park on the street. And in time it may well be that, as I say, that ownership of cars will become less frequent and common.
It's a very steep site. It's a very steep site for people with disabilities.
The hill, the front of the house, the road is quite steep. The path down to the shops, which goes through some paths, are very steep.
Yeah.
This is true.
I guess the idea that we're thinking through at the moment in terms of if that 3rd unit does become its own title, while it is a steep site, but if there's street parking, a ramp that's easily accessible right from the street down the driveway, and that'll bring them straight to their front door.
But they couldn't walk anywhere, they couldn't use a disability scooter or a wheelchair. This is
Well, the access from the ramping for the ramp is compliant.
Once they got on the street, it could be hazardous.
Yeah.
Go down the path to the shops, it's too steep. In fact, there's about 6 stairs on that path down to the shops.
So that would absolutely be of concern for someone potentially buying it. That might be a deal breaker. It might be someone who's actually quite able still, but they don't want to live all by themselves. There's so many hypothetical scenarios there when it comes to the individual who ends up living in that space. You're absolutely right though. It is on a hill, which means it has spectacular views, and you're still up in your community that you've lived in for possibly a long time.
Oh, Bill, you've got a question?
Who's on?
Always.
I'm not against the proposal personally. I can see a lot of benefits in it, but I'm not hearing the killer argument to do a variation to the territory plan to enable a construction like this. I hear a lot of information, but I'm not hearing the absolute argument that would crunch the dirt. Have you got one?
Well, in my view, we need more housing stock. I mean, I don't think that's just my view. I mean, that's pretty clear, and it's certainly a legislated aim. At the moment, that's being delivered through really dense, whether it's multi-storey or multi-unit townhouse developments. And I think a lot of the opposition from Canberrans to that is heartfelt and legitimate because it has really changed the nature of the city. And again, we don't have that missing middle. And so that's what this territory plan variation is about. And in fact, that's what the demonstration housing project is about. It's about providing housing diversity to the market that doesn't currently exist. Because of various constraints in the territory plan, I mean, it's a highly prescriptive document. And in fact, I think we no longer can see the forest for the trees, so to speak, because there are so many rules and regulations in there that we've forgotten, in fact, what the purpose of the territory plan was and what the outcomes are that we want from a planning instrument. If we go back to basics, if we talk about things like access to green space, energy efficiency, accessibility, design quality, and have those as the goals, and then we allow, some greater flexibility in relation to a particular development, I think we might start to see better developments, and that's what we think this one is, and we hope you agree. But we need to relax the territory plan to allow this kind of development to happen.
All the relaxation does is allows you to do separate titles. This can be built on that footprint now under the existing proposal one code, can't it?
Well, yes, 2 dwellings could be built, or a larger single dwelling, in fact. But there are all kinds of social and economic and environmental benefits from having a third dwelling that has these kinds of characteristics. So,
If I can expand as well on that, John, there was a community we're a community, right? We've been in this space for a long time, and you can actually wind back to 50 years when it was a developing community. You knew your neighbours, you knew who was there, you knew who to call if someone was knocking on your door and they were sus. And I feel like as a member of the community, if I knew something like this was going up across the world from me, which I've got a property across the road that's 480 square metres, single residence for one guy, and you think, well, my connection to my neighbours is very different now to what it was in the generations previous to us, and I feel like that's a very crucial human element that we need to embrace as part of this plan, because what this is allowing us to do is effectively have a community of people living together and utilising that connection to human beings that we don't necessarily have. We have a lot of beautiful big mansions being built on fluffy blocks. This is exemplary in that it provides an entirely new concept that can hopefully shift that focus back to community, back to human-centred design, and that to me is very compelling.
That's a single dwelling.
Excuse me, we've got someone else to question.
Okay, press anything or it's on? Okay, thanks. Look, when I just read through the plans, it seemed like it was a good piece of architectural design that you would find in a normal unit design. But of course the zoning is a bit different and the scale seems fine. So would actually start putting quality architecture back into the community by having it compulsory for a good architect to design it. Because if this was done by a bad designer or a bad spec builder, good spec builders and bad ones, but a bad spec builder, then it could really mess things up. So is this the plan? It seems cumbersome to have to go and have it reviewed by an architect review panel, which I understand would be flat out trying to get through all the other developments in town. So are you proposing that you would have a good quality registered architect on it when these are done in the future?
Well, yes, exactly. Essentially, that's the concept. So, if at the moment this is only proposed for this particular block, and the territory plan variation would only be for this particular block, but the idea would be, if this is successful and it's ultimately supported by the community and it works, that might create some momentum for a similar kind of law to be passed for other RZ1 blocks to have this kind of development. But it has to have those proper parameters. So it has to have things that the community values, like accessibility, access to green space, efficiency, and in particular the design quality. And I think at least one of the mechanisms that would be required there would be that it would have to go through the design review panel, which we've had to, and we didn't find that to be a particularly arduous process. We welcomed it. They had really good constructive feedback to provide us, but that absolutely should be the minimum. It would have to be whether or not you have to engage an architect is a question, although if you don't, you're probably going to run into trouble with the design review panel, that's for sure.
One final question from Phil online. Very short answer. Will you be living there? Will you, the developers, be living there, or will you be selling it, and what's the time frame?
Good questions. So no, we won't be living there. The intention is to sell these. And timeframes, look, we would really like to start construction in 2022. That's where we are now, isn't it? Hopefully. But first we have to undertake, of course, our consultation and submit our DA and have it approved. And then there's a territory plan variation process. And so I should emphasise there will obviously be further opportunities for consultation too. But yeah, if you're interested in the project and seeing it coming out of the ground, then yeah, keep a close eye on the block from around 2022. I just have to remind myself of what year it is now. It's not 2020 anymore, is it? Thank goodness. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Bianca. Thanks, Chloe, for that. Don't forget, if you've got any comments, please either give them to council or give them to preferably Bianca. Yeah. And we'll put your link up on both Facebook and on our website. And can I get a copy of the presentation to put on both those sites too?
Yeah, I can get it.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you for that. It's another concept we have to adjust to. Bill's going to give us a brief on Greeley Street, our survey that we did back in December, January, I think, and it's got some interesting results in it. What did you do? You right? Ready to go? Thanks, Bill.
Can you hear me there? Sorry, just getting used to a different machine. Well, we did a brief survey between 28th December and 17th January discussing what people thought about Greeley Street. This is in the context of the government's election promise, which is now converted into a budget measure, I believe, and also moving some money from the car park proposal. So, look here we go. That was this afternoon down there. In case you missed it, there was a bit of a flood, stormwater, water bleeding. So, they talked about the 2020 election. Okay, Tom and I met with Chris Earl, the minister, and he gave us an idea of what he was thinking. It's very important to note, he gave us an idea of what he was thinking. We turned it into a survey and asked you what you thought what he was thinking. They're not our ideas, please. Because all through the survey, people are getting hot shots. Your government, you make the bad decisions, so on, so on, so on. What we're saying is we're an advocacy group. We're advising government. They can take our advice, they can leave it, they can leave our advice, we might kick up a storm, who knows where we might end up. Okay? So, we asked 9 questions. 2 of these allowed for extensive free text response, free ranging if you like. The other 7 required a type response. Questions were, this was a bit sad to put this one out there, in hindsight, what do you think of Greeley Street is as it is now? And just type in what you felt. We asked, should it be narrowed and become a one-way street? Should it be closed altogether, becoming a pedestrian-only space? If it did become a one-way street, which direction should the traffic flow? Should it be narrowed? Would you support outdoor cafes? And that's, I was glad to vote for that. Should there be street art installed along Greeley Street? Should there be improved shade along Greeley Street? I used to be around, so you can guess where I'm at. Should outdoor performances, including busking, be encouraged along Greeley Street? And is there anything you would like to add? Oh, that was a mistake. So, what do you think it is now? I've taken a representative shot here because we had 348 responses. So I took out what was fairly typical. So, people saying is like, it's a bit of nothing space. There's not much there in terms of shops. It's more small business. I don't really need to go down that street much, and a lot of people said that in various ways. Terrible, ugly, full of traffic, I hate it. Should be totally closed to traffic, outdoor cafes, bike paths, and increasing gardens. It's so sterile. It's just a street with the only highlight being Bruce's tulip display. Where is she? And we got a lot of those. People loved the flower display at Stadatoria. They said it invigorated it, lightened it up. Good, although the change to that seating family area makes it more congested, also very ugly. Go through these. It's exposed to weather. No life projects on it except in coffee shops in the service station. It isn't pedestrian friendly, especially in intersections. Little planned amenity, like coordinated plantings or decorations. Horrible concrete jungle. Those red and yellow and red fish colours. What a waste of dollars. Last redbird. Looks awful. Please not make it a one-way street. Cars speed and it's dangerous because of congested traffic. It functions as a road and that's fine. We've got people talking about it as a freeway. They wanted to burn through there, quickest way out of the place. Avoid it as much as possible. Lots of this. It's very difficult to cross and the park is not conducive to use. And it goes on and on. So that's just a sample. But should it be narrowed? What did we think out of 348 people? 60%, over 60% were saying no. That's pretty compelling arguments to not do that. Then there's the actual numbers, 23.28 versus 61.21, and boy, there's some great comments about us proposing that. Okay, should be closed altogether, becoming a pedestrian-only space. So, 50% were no, about 35% were yes, and 13% are undecided. 14% undecided. That one bounced around across the period of the survey. I looked every couple of days and watched it happen. The other one, the one-way street, from day one was just the same proportion all the way through. And people had made up their minds. If it did become a one-way street, this is the point now, which direction should the traffic flow? South towards Stirling, got west and north towards Civic. So all roads have to lead to Civic. People over away think they should go there. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. People want to road through there, but people also wouldn't mind seeing it being narrowed to get their outdoor cafes. So we need to think about this a bit more. 77% would support narrow the outdoor cafe culture if it was narrow. Then we go on, street art. Where's Simone gone? Simone's promoted the street art. Well, she's got popular support there with near enough to 67% saying we should have street art. Should there be improved shade? I'm a proponent of improved shade and I'm having my outdoor coffee down at Chris's or wherever. I'm not alone. With 80-60%, which is great. And we all know how hot it gets off that concrete, and it's been a theme in a few other presentations. We know it, and people obviously know it. Yeah, should we have some outdoor performances, including busking, be encouraged along Ridley Street? Once again, lots in favour. In the free text, there was a lot of commentary, yes, the busking is really good, but generally supported. There's your numbers, just under 60% say yes. And then, is there anything you'd like to add? I put the ones that we could publish and present in public. There's some rivers in there, it's a great read. But the thing is, please soften the look and fill the middle seats, better weather protection. A lot of people are saying, please leave it alone, stop removing motor vehicles streets. Then we have more entertainment, alfresco dining. We had a number of people say, well, we need a multi-storey car park. Don't do anything else until you sort out the multi-storey car park, and they keep talking about down the Woolworth seat that we affectionately call it. And then a similar number of people saying, yeah, but let's make a pedestrian strip. Access only to service vehicles or handicapped vehicle access. We should say disabled vehicle access. Why change something that works and accommodates the community to easy to access shops? Do not change any more of it. It's hard enough to drive around the park. More shade's a good idea though. Do not narrow the street. Okay, but people said the bus moving through the area needs work too. The gas, the upgrade a few years ago, as we heard in the earlier part, what is the problem government is trying to solve here? And I like this. If we're going to try to solve the problem, we should define it. Then you get into, leave out to Longlow Valley is sorted. And how long will that be? While I like your idea of Ridley Street being pedestrian only, parking is limited, cool and court, and I wouldn't want my parking to be cut. More nature, less metal, connect the two sides of the street. I'd love to see a space like Green Square in Kingston. And this appeals to me, the village concept, maintain the village rather than the great big concrete monoliths may turn up one day. Make it more people-friendly, people-centric. If it's going to be a one-way street or pedestrian only, the amenity of the street would need to vastly improve. At least it's useful for driving along. That theme came out time and time and time again. So the camp's really split. So what are we going to do with it? The majority of you really supports the upgrade, with some support for the narrowing. some supportive of making it one way, but the majority strongly opposes it. With the RA, really, apologies. Around half the respondents do not support closure of the thoroughfare. The other half is either supportive or undecided. We've got strong support for street art, improved shade and entertainment space. We have a significant number of comments about the safety of the crossings and in car parks. And as a result, I'm going to lean on Tom to write a letter to Chris Field about safety of the car parks here, and that's one in the way there. Who can talk about it shortly. And further analysis required on views that narrowing the thoroughfare and possible closure. I'd like to dig into that other 50-odd% to find out what they're really thinking. And it might be a job we have to go, or we might run our own survey or other engagement with people. Okay, next steps. We will write to the Institute with the results, and we will copy the other MLAs like we're into that. We'll explore, and we are exploring avenues to improve street art, improved shade and entertainment space. As I said earlier, further analysis required on views about narrowing the thoroughfare and possible closure. Another survey, and I was hoping Simone would still be in the room to talk about the really by design proposal we're discussing. And we are seeking detailed feedback via our social media channels, or just by notes to Tom, or just generally catching any of the committee around the street saying, hey, this is what I think. So that we're coming from an informed view rather than trying to scratch our heads and go, what do you think? Okay, so that's it. Any questions?
I'll just have to point out that actually the majority said no, they don't want goals being touched. So you can't say half do, half don't. The majority is flat out said no. That was a question.
No, I disagree with that, Nora.
That's right.
I've said,
Go back to it, I'll take a vote.
I'll go back to it later. We can talk about it later. I'll talk to you about the session. I'll take you through it.
No, I'm
But what we're saying is, let's find out what people are thinking who are in the other half.
ready to go out the street.
Yeah.
It does sound like she might actually have a point. I thought that if everybody's looking for maintaining good transport through there, but to have some improvement in streetscape, I mean, I have to admit that when you've got a sloping road, it's very difficult to have outdoor cafes because you basically got to have a series of steps because otherwise your coffee splits off one side. So I mean, it's basically it's kind of the starting point for actually creating an active street is not good. And as much as I like the idea of more pedestrianisation and more active facades and all of the strengthening of community activities and creating a core, all those sort of things that someone on the committee have heard me talk about before. It is a good point that the public are making, that the survey, maybe we shouldn't be pushing too hard to try and push this into something that's potentially good flavor. And maybe we should be just looking at improving the streetscape, improving the art, improving the feel of it, and then actually trying to put our cafes elsewhere where it's on a flatter site with better amenity. So there's a bit of thinking to be done.
Definitely, Warwick, and that's why we are having that really by design discussion. I will point you may not have seen it. I was very attracted to the main street of Nelson Bay, which is also sloping, and they've done something like that. How you're talking about it, they've done it. So worth a look at. I've got some photos I can share with you. I took them when we were doing this survey. Yeah.
Certainly, if it was closed or reduced, it would certainly increase the overhead street traffic. It's already becoming quite
Yeah, agreed. It needs a holistic discussion. Like I said earlier, we talked to Chris Steele, we got out of his mind, what he was thinking in his ear or something, downloaded what he was thinking, sorry Chris, you're watching, and we interpreted that and put it into a survey. We didn't have any objective except to find out what the people were thinking. So what you're thinking in the same goal is going on there. A lot of people did make that same comment about Leonard Street. Yeah, you're not alone. Why is there a permanent oil on road sign out there? I know why. So yeah, it's an issue, and it did come up. And our good friend here is about to put his signature on a letter he doesn't know about yet to the relevant minister saying, hey, these are issues that come out of the survey.
I'm relatively new to the area, but would it make more sense to have, if you want an outdoor cafe area, that Trannery Street area to be that area? Because it's relatively flat, it's open areas, it's already got cafes around it. If you were, it'd be quite easy just to remove, say, some of the parking there and have an open cafe area. Logistically wise, it would be easier because it's already effectively shaped as one.
Look, you've had a good point, and we will include it in the feedback. Other people did say it, a small number said, perhaps you could do something there. And all we can do is report what we've learned. We're not the decision makers. I'm emphasising that because people kept on saying, you failed with Trannery Square. You failed with that red and yellow thing. So I'm making sure, we're just delivering a message. Alice, good point.
I was just going to ask a question. I don't know the background to this, but so did the minister actually provide a business case and any kind of evidence, or was this just a brief conversation, or what's the background sort of research that's been done on this proposal? Is it a proposal or is it?
It was an election promise. They've undertaken to do it. I think it's going to be funded in August.
Yeah, it should be funded in August, probably money left to the side of the car.
On top of it. There was some money left over from the car park down in the mysteries of public finance. You can appropriate some money to build a car park. You cannot build it and 60 or 70% back. So you figure that one out. But some of them will go to Ridley Street. They've committed $2 million to doing something there. So we're only talking about Ridley Street.
Right. And so there's not much detail in the promise, it's just we're going to do something to
And come
push it up or something.
and we will come and we will consult with the people. So we consulted, we're going to go, hey, this is what they're telling you so far. Let's have a further conversation.
Alice, it goes back to the master plan for the Western Group Centre, and in that was phase 1 of Ridley Street upgrade, which was Trannery Square, and then the second phase has always been sitting there, and this is the start of the move by the government
to act on that second
phase. And they promised to take the money out of Coolman Park car park and put it into the Ridley Street upgrade. Whether that's all the money or not, I don't know. And where we go from there, I don't know either. What we wanted to do was to get on the front foot so that when the government was coming to us to say they want to come out and consult on this, we would have gone out to the community like we have done, and we'll go out again so that we can be hopefully confident of what the community wants. And
I think that's completely fair. Can council go to the minister and then ask for some actual details? So is the minister drawing on architectural expertise, on some sort of planning expertise? Because it seems to me that I would appreciate being able to see some kind of detail, given that I'm not from that background, and some sort of, to give me an idea about what the costs and benefits are of different types of changes that might be made, that might assist the community to provide, constructive feedback.
No, they're not that far advanced. There was some concept
Yeah, you're right, Alice. What they do is somebody will be in there beavering away on some concepts of lands and getting a broad brush of what they think, and then they'll come out and have some consultation with us. What we're trying to do is get in early, feed into the process, and see if we can influence that. And I hope what they will then do is come out and have some further consultation, maybe. And I went to a meeting about the upgrade of the bus stops along near Jura. No project, same team, same area. And I said, what are you doing about Bailey Street? They said, we haven't got the brief yet. When we get it, we'd like to do some consultation. So I've offered to slot in one Tom's meetings. Sorry, Tom, can you tell you about that one?
Our meetings.
Yeah, our meetings, committee meetings. So we invite people along to have this sort of input, so perhaps we can get a better outcome. It has to be better. The more mind you put to it, you should get a better outcome.
So there is a brief. So there is a brief on what they expect to do with the street.
They're working on it now.
Right.
They'll be working on it. It hasn't seen light of day. So we're going to write a letter, we're going to hand this over. Emma's going to get the survey. Marissa has undertaken to take what we've done and also have a look at it. I mentioned they'll get in and have a chat with Chris Steele, and I think Julia's of the same mind, Julia Jones, so we'll share it round. We only finished this yesterday in terms of analysis, because as people were polling in this meeting, we're going, I'm not going to have time to do this. So we've got time.
I might stop that one there. Alice, what was the other thing I was thinking of that relates to this? Treasury Square. We had 2 lots of consultations and a whole lot of work went on, and at the end of the day they said, we tried to get them back in about 12 months to say what was the final design. And when they came to the meeting, they said, we signed the contract this afternoon, here it is.
So I guess that's probably where I'm going with this.
Yeah, well, that's why we want to get on the front.
Yeah, I totally understand that. I guess that's where I'm going with this, which is that there might be a tendency here to give the appearance of kind of consultation, when in actual fact there may be a plan all along as to what the government intends to do, and maybe there would be some.
Yeah, Bill and I raised it with Chris Steele when we met with him.
Right.
We put it to him and he came back with his thoughts.
Okay.
So that's where it was at then when we met in December. I'm going to call that quits now. I'm going to ask Emma Davidson to come up, please, and give us 5 minutes before what's our time. That's all right. Take your time, watch the stairs. I don't need to. Thank you for coming along late after ministerial meetings.
Thank you very much. Look, can I just say, actually, those survey results and the presentation you were giving there, that's exactly the kind of thing that I really appreciate about community councils, is the way that you're able to go out and engage with your local community, and then, sort of collate it all together and have a conversation about it. And I would love to do a lot more of that kind of conversation at these meetings. I find it really informative and helpful, and it means that next time I'm bumping into Chris in the corridors at the office, I can be in his ear about, hey, I saw something really interesting in the council meeting on Wednesday night. What day is it? Yeah, time is an abstract concept for me. I also wanted to talk a little bit about Paulo Park. So we are needing to start thinking about what actually do we want in this space, and that might connect in with what happens on Brearley Street. One of the things that we need to think about when we're thinking about one aspect of our community is how it connects in with all the other things that are going through a process of change. I also think quite a lot about what's happening with our public transport systems in respect of that. The idea of reducing car traffic in the street will work a whole lot better if people have really good public transport options. So having a better understanding of what people need, and what I saw in your paper with you all a lot more about what you would like to see for the future of Coolo Park. Would you like more trees? Would you like more picnic tables? Would you like playgrounds? Would you like some sort of built infrastructure? Would you like bike racks? There were suggestions at the community picnic on the weekend for things like markets, a giant chessboard, all sorts of things, an amphitheatre, someone suggested. So these are all things that we should be having a conversation about, so that I can go and have a talk to Chris about, hey, here's what the community is actually looking for, and here's the benefits that it will bring to them in terms of activating community spaces and bringing good well-being benefits to the entire community. Does anyone have any questions for me about things that have been going on over the last month since our last meeting?
I've got an online question. And I promised these people I'd ask it because it's dear to their hearts. And they apologised for not being able to attend tonight. They went to a family function in Brisbane, came home, they're in quarantine. The question is, and you've heard me ask this too, so it's great. When are we getting a smoke measuring station in Western Creek? Now this person is a severe chronic asthmatic. They struggle all the winter. They often go to Queensland to get some relief. They've just been to Queensland and got a problem now, but we find over here it's a different weather pattern. The air holds in situ here differently to Monash, where we're pointed at to go, hey, this is your air quality for today. I learned a lot about air quality during the bushfire period. I think my litmus test was when chooks started dying. But we were beyond World Health standards by any stretch of the imagination. Here's a person with a chronic illness. They want to know whether it's safe to go outside or what medication to take before they go. I think we're probably going to have to push that a bit harder. I know I've been asking about it for about 2 years here. So anyway, over to you.
That is a really good question, and with the number of older houses that still have wood-burning heaters, particularly in the suburbs that were built sort of, 1970s and 60s, I can understand that's contributing as well. I will take that on notice and take that up with Rebecca Basrodi's office, because I think she will have the answer to that, and then I can get back to you and you could maybe share it on your Facebook page or add it to the minutes for the next meeting. Would that be okay?
Can do, and I can get the response to the individual if you like, or I can even put Rebecca in touch with her.
That would be great, thank you. Yeah. Yes,
Those wood ends are surprising because way back 90s or whatever it was, they were actually forced to put some sort of filter in there to prevent that, and then for some reason they pulled them out again, which is ridiculous. So maybe you can kind of on that find out what's been wrong there. And I'm not sure if this is your area or not. I have concerns about that they want to put a tariff on our solar panels on our feed-in tariff. So they want to charge us for using the sun that does not belong to the government, belongs to the world. What do you know about that?
Yes, I can understand why that would be concerning. I know a lot of people have invested in solar panels to avoid exactly those kinds of issues. And we certainly don't want to discourage people from switching to renewable energy, but I will take that up with the Minister for Emissions and get back to you with an answer.
Is that shame?
There will be shame.
Can I add to that?
Yes.
Council is doing a submission to the inquiry, and I hope we're putting this into this submission as well.
Hi Emma, I have a question online. I'm sorry, this might be out of your scope, but thought I'd ask it anyway. Western Valley Gymnastics Club have been waiting for a response from Minister Steele about changing the land use zone for the rundown tennis courts on Mully Street in Holder to a community facility in the hope that they could build a new gymnasium on the site. Could someone please follow up on it? They don't have a response.
Yes, and I'm actually wondering whether it might be Minister Gentleman's office for planning that might be the people that we need to talk to. So I will take that up with them and find out. But yeah, I've been out there and seen how busy their existing hall is, and you know, the weeds growing through the cracks in the old tennis court. So I can understand, you know, the pressures they're under. But yeah, I will find out.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Anna. Bill, I forgot to thank you for all the hard work you've been putting into the survey. You and Simone as your offsider into that, and probably Michelle's been involved in that too. And there's a lot of work's gone into that, so on behalf of the community, thank you.
Thanks very much.
The charge comes from the I forget what the actual name is, but it's a federal regulator. It's their thoughts, the people that manage the power supply across the eastern grid, if you like, and that the grid can't take it. And so the problem is that they want to put a charge on, which is about $30. I don't know whether it's a year or a quarter if you feed into the system. What that's going to do, I'm not quite sure.
But ours is on our grid. It's our grid.
Yeah, but if you want to feed it into the grid, it's their grid, and that's where.
We paid for it, it's our. We bought it, didn't we? We paid for it. With our money, all that money for it, it's ours.
Look, I'm not trying to think, I'm just trying to give you some background. I'll get you, it's OENA or something like that. The people there. So, Janice, do you want to provide us with the Treasury report? If you got a minute? Oh yeah, take your time. I don't know what it's like. Oh, great day today for me. I finished my drops for my cataract replacements. 7 weeks I've been doing drops in my eyes. Would never have made a bomb aimer in World War II, I can tell you. Oh, did you? Yeah.
Just for the Treasurer's report, we run, Westbury Community Council runs 2 accounts. The main account, which is the one that we run for the council, specifically for the running costs of the council. At the moment we've got $15,413.99, and that's all come through government grants. We get a recurring grant every year. We also look after an account for the Featherston Gardens. They come under the auspices of the Western Creek Community Council, and at the moment they've got $8,604.53.
Thanks, Janice. We've got some minutes somewhere of the last meeting. I think they've been circulated. Or did we get the wrong one? Get the right one?
The wrong ones were distributed. They were from last time, so we're going to put them up online as soon as possible.
Okay, all right. Okay, well, we'll do that, and that'll resolve that. General business, the scammers. We've had enough discussion about that, I think. I'm really pleased actually that we were, both Bill and I were on radio talking about it. It's good to get it out there, and there were some responses coming back in, which was even better. The Duffy Shops upgrade, as Marissa Patterson mentioned, it's on the Your Say website. It's open at the moment, and there's a public consultation on the 17th of April between 2 and 4 on the site of Duffy Shops. And I'd encourage anyone who's got an involvement with Duffy or Duffy's primary school to go along there and give your views on what you think of the plan. We'll have it, we haven't got it up on our Facebook site yet. Yeah, we have, yeah, it's up there, and we'll get it on our website too. We also want to hear your views on the budget. We're going to make a submission on the next budget, which will be for 2021, 2022. And we need to hear back from people. We've got some ideas of what's required, but we really love to hear from you what your thoughts are on those matters. We'll probably be putting a submission in around end of April, early May, once we get an invite to put it in, or we might go ahead anyway without the invite. But it's very important that you tell us what you think. I got a very long email today actually from a member of the community saying, here are my thoughts, and I welcome those because we want to hear what people think, just as we do for Greeley Street, just as we do for Cooley Park. We've sent a letter to Chris Steele asking for an extensive traffic survey because of what's happening, particularly in the peak hour times, and we're asking for an external company to do that rather than get the government to do it. We want a fresh set of eyes, as it were, on that, and hopefully that will go ahead. The Molonglo Valley Community Forum's up and running. They had their first meeting on the 18th of March. They're having another one on the 22nd of April. Cooley Park, well, we might do a survey about what we want on there. We might chat about that and get some ideas. If anyone's got any ideas about that, please let us know. But that might be another one to try and encourage people to come forward. And what else? A lease variation request in Coombs. That was to do with a block that was sold, and it now has a childcare centre in it. It has a space for community facilities and to be hired out. The problem is that the rental is far too high. The starting rental was at something like $90,000 a year, and the block was sold on that basis. No one's used it because no one can afford it, and actually it's not well advertised. The owner went to the planning authority and asked for the lease to be varied, and council said we didn't agree with that, and planning authority refused the application, which is a really good outcome of that. Next month, 28th of April, we've got Canberra Hospital coming along again to tell us the result of their consultations on their master plan. If you were here last meeting, you would have heard the presentation and the questions that were asked, and not sure that they covered what they should have covered, but anyway, that's me, and I'm happy to take questions on most things, if anyone's got any questions. Rosemary.
What's happening with the village building up beside the corner of Bison?
What's happening with it?
No, that's what I'm asking.
Yes, that's a very good question, Rosemary. I don't know. Council went to the ACAP as a party joint, and we went to 12 days of hearings, and as a result of that we finished about the 12th of December, and they adjourned to consider the evidence that's been given, and we're waiting. And we're still waiting, yes, yeah. But there's a lot of technical legal arguments within it, particularly from Village, and some from the government, which left Pat and I a bit confused about what definitions mean. Well, there's a really good, I can't remember it now. What was it?
Couldn't you get a private solicitor to act for you? You should have been able to.
Oh.
Because you're like a voluntary community, you should be able to get private solicitor.
Yeah, we didn't go down that path.
Well, you should have asked me about it.
Well, you've got to get someone to go there for gone through. They've got new people in there that recognise some of the errors of their ways. They thought that the community facility in Wright, it's now a medical centre, would be better than the one that's in the hub. But I think too, they're learning on that. And for the blocks around Coco, they've had a group of people meet on 2 Saturdays in a row out of the community and to provide some input as to what they want there, when it should be there, and we'll see what comes out of it. You can see the contrast. I always contrast what's happened with the Suburban Land Agency and Capital Estates Development. That's always been my contrast, and they're chalk and cheese.
They're fantastic. What they've done, their generosity, I think, is amazing.
Well, the community facility building with the childcare in it, Capital Estates built that. And they built it because they felt it was needed. And I think the first cost with the development application was about 3 million, with another $1 million for land works. But Nick McDonald Crowley tells me it's cost a bit more than that.
I didn't hear his presentations